Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Motogp Xtra podcast. This week, the 2022 Motogp season ended with a title decider in Valencia. I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of the weekend is Dill. Now, before we actually do properly get into the episode, can't believe it, we've actually made it through a whole season. It seems such a long time ago since the beginning of March, but we actually managed to do the podcast for the whole season, which is great for us because we tend to stop things before they get to the end, don't we?
Yeah, we're not the best at seeing things through, but to be fair, I will give it its credit. The season has flown by, and same with the podcast. I think we've been on. I don't think we've missed any. They've all gone out bang on time. Touch wood that this goes out at 9 a.m. Monday our time, so that we don't ruin our 20 race streak. But so far so good. I think we both enjoyed it. I think we have some ideas going forward that we might look into after today's podcast. But for now, we're focusing mainly on today and what the season has given us.
Yeah, it definitely is enjoyable. And like you say, we are looking at maybe changing some things up for next season to try and improve it. But we'll move straight to the actual action of the weekend then. First of all, of course, the Moto3 class. No title decider in that class was clinched back in Australia by Izan Guevara. But there was a little bit of action before the actual race. It was actually during free practice. There's a bit of a fisticuffs between Yama Masia and Kaito Toba. A little bit of a weird incident between them initially is obviously what caused it. They both crashed. Like Toba went a little bit wide, Masia a little bit optimistic to try and go underneath. It was literally the smallest touch, but because they had so much lane angle, they both just sort of span out and crashed. Now that led Toba to sort of just tap Masia's helmet, say, "Oh, well done, mate," and Masia gave him a bit of a punch back in response to that. So, what did you think of the whole incident, Bill?
It's a bit silly, really. His last race of the season, championship's done. You're kind of finishing everything up. I think it's probably, if anything, it sums up Masia's season that there was points where he might have been a championship challenger, and then it's all boiled over and it's just kind of fell flat. And I think Toba tapping him on his head after they collided in practice probably was just the edge, him being pushed over the edge, and punching a guy with an FIM helmet on him is not really going to do much damage to him. You can even see afterwards Toba looks and was like, what was that for? Like, I'd say he barely even felt it with the helmet on, but they both got penalised. It's just silly. Again though, we'll get to this in a second, the race direction being inconsistent with it, because John McPhee was very vocal on Twitter asking for his €1,000 back after he punched Jeremy Alcoba in Qatar in the gravel of Turn 1 for a much worse incident. But again, the stewarding seems to be confusing there because they don't really keep any consistency with these incidents. Thankfully, we don't see these sort of punch-ups very often, but when we do, they seem to just throw a random penalty on it. I think even the stewards were like, we're winding down for the end of the year, we'll just give them a long lap and a pit lane start, but unnecessary. It's not like they did in like the last lap of a race. I think, again, like I mentioned already, I think Masia just boiled over after how poor season has turned out being in the end.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty good insight, to be fair. Masia's season's not gone the way he wants, so he's probably leaving the IO team. A couple of rough seasons for him there, to be honest, but it was just so silly because it was free practice and they just both ruined their races right there. Like, to be fair, I mean, what Masia did was like obviously worse, but I understand why both were given the same penalty because, of course, Toba did initially start the confrontation, I guess, and they did shove back a little bit afterwards. But yeah, it's such a pointless thing to do. Good point there about John McPhee, although that was obviously a completely different situation because it was in the race and obviously it built up over time. But yeah, it does point out the inconsistency of the stewards because also those guys had time penalties on top of their pit lane starts rather than long lap penalties, and like they had the fines. So yeah, it was just an all-around bizarre situation. I'm sure the two of them will want to forget that one quickly. But actually moving on to the race itself, for a Moto3 race, wasn't amazing, was it? It was kind of dull. The whole pack was sort of spread out. There was one sort of pack from about 4th place down to about 10th, but there were very few passes between them. Again, it seemed to be the trend that's continued, really, with once Guevara gets out front, it just pulls away, and it's just a bit of a boring race. Do you think it was more that or more of the track layout?
I think it was a lot of things, really. I think, again, we've just seen a lot of people moving up to Moto 2, some people moving teams, a lot of people winding down, and just the likes of Guevara, who has so much good pace. He's on such a great run of form. He's champion. It's his last race for the team before he moves up. Well, being staying in that team, but moving up last time in the Moto3 class for him. So he wanted to go out and put on a performance and kind of sign off on a high, which he did very well. Anchu, always you feel like no matter what weekend it is, no matter how well his weekend or how badly it goes, he'd always have a chance at the race when he's kind of that top rack kind of school where they just never give in. They're always on the limit. They've so aggressive and they just pull results out when you don't expect it. And then kind of it was Garcia and Sasaki in kind of third and fourth, and then that got split up, and it was an okay battle from fourth down, but again, we didn't see much of it. We kind of, for the most of the footage, it was watching the front two kind of wheels in line following each other around. It was very much a Moto2 style race where I felt that Anchu was just trying to get an idea where maybe he could pull a pass, and it did take all the way down to the last lap before we did get a move. So it was one of the less entertaining Moto3 races, but a big thing would have been causing that would have been track conditions. A lot of incidents throughout the weekend were put down to the track condition of being quite cold, even though it looked nice and sunny and the conditions seemed pretty good. Cold surface and a pretty green track all weekend. A lot of riders, even in the GP race, the last session of the day, were complaining about how there was very, very little grip. So probably a bit of everything put together just ended up with this combination of a slightly below par race.
Yeah, Valencia is a bit of a nasty little track, and when it's cold in November, it's never that nice. I imagine. Obviously, we wouldn't really know, but you can kind of tell just by the layout and how it always happens every year. It's just one of those weird parts of the season, shall we say? But you did mention a couple of times throughout there the Anchu and Guevara battle. Pretty good battle, to be fair. There, Dennis Anchu, I've got to say, I'm quite impressed with him because he didn't do anything particularly silly. I didn't think he just sat there the whole race. Only guy that could keep up with Guevara's pace, and Guevara was setting a searing pace at the front, sort of like lap record pace. So fair play to Dennis Anchu. He was so close to getting that first ever victory for him. I was kind of rooting for him a little bit because it would have been nice for him to sort of get his first ever victory and then go into next year where he could potentially be a title contender because he's been pretty solid this year, moving into the IO team. So you would expect that they would expect a championship fight in that team. So you never know what's going to happen. So he probably will be set up pretty well for next year, but just missing out on it. A good pass into, is it turn 8 initially? And then he sort of ran wide through there doing the pass, but he hung it around the outside. It was a great pass, but then it all went wrong at the last corner, didn't it?
Yeah, he kind of timed it perfect. It was kind of the move, if any move he was going to do, it was never going to be corner speed and up the inside. It was going to be a lunge from a bit of a distance, and he went so deep, but he did get it stopped and then was so brave. You can kind of get away with that. I think we'll talk about it more in GP race. A few riders did it where if you hang on the outside, it becomes the inside for turn 11, so then you become the rider of favour. So if you can just hold it out far enough, if you're just kind of level with the rider on your left, you can just get away with it, and he did. And to be honest, when they went through turn 11, he looked like he got a good exit. I thought it was done for, really. I thought the only chance is if Guevara has a go into the last corner, and he went defensive, very, very defensive. Too defensive in my opinion, because that corner naturally gets tighter the closer to the apex. So to go defensive, you're instantly giving yourself a really bad exit. Now, whether if he stayed on the offensive, went to his normal line, would Guevara have passed him? I don't know. But he opened the door to Guevara just to square him off, and even on a Moto3 bike, it is possible when he got such a poor run. And before they were out of third gear, Guevara was already after levelling him out of the corner, and it was a pretty easy drag to the line. But good overall scrap. The fact that he was that close to Guevara, who's been best rider of the season, he'll take some good solace from that. But he's just missing that small bit for the victory, and I think it'll floodgates will open when he gets his first one. He'll be a rider next year. I'd be very surprised if we're at this point next year and we're still talking about him not winning a race. I reckon he'll be very quick next year. He's had a good year this year. He seems to be building, so I reckon maybe next year he could be, definitely he'll be one of the title favourites. Whether he'll actually be able to do it for a full season without injury, without crashing, I don't know, but he'll definitely have a few race wins in my opinion next year.
Yeah, I think something's definitely gone wrong if he hasn't won a race by this point next year, especially in that IO team. But yeah, he just went a bit too defensive into the last corner. To be honest, it was just more the fact he braked too late. Don't know if maybe he went down a gear too many or something, because the rear did seem to snap a little bit, like stepped out quite a lot, but I think he just was forcing it to fit. Really, it'd have been better off going defensive, fair enough, because obviously he didn't want to leave the inside open, but he would have definitely been better off braking a bit earlier, but that's obviously easy. It's easy to say on the settee when you're watching the race rather than being on board the bike. But with the season being done now, then we decided to sort of just give some end of season thoughts for each class. So we'll go with Moto3 first, of course. And overall this season, I think really Guevara obviously has been the standout, being the champion. And I think that's my overall thought from the season, just how amazing he was. Because to start with, obviously, we thought Garcia was looking good. Really, my standout moments are just the fact that Guevara was fantastic. And to be honest, that Foggia was so disappointing. And also just the Honda in general. Those are my main thoughts from the season. Guevara was so good, but Foggia and the Honda were just so bad. What about you? Do you have any particular standouts from the season?
Mine will take a bit of a backstory to get to the point, but Guevara beat Pedro Costa in the pre-Moto3 days when they were in the Spanish Championship, and you often hear of these situations where someone beats a high prospect rider, someone beating a Rossi in the lower category and they never going to do it. So when you hear that, oh, this guy beat Pedro Costa, and then Acosta comes up, and they both come up last year, but Acosta absolutely ripped everything up last year and dominated and was unbelievable. That Guevara in his rookie year was like massively in the shadow of him, and then this year we come along and we just see it's just completely different rider, because they will say the shadow of Acosta's gone. He's in a good team, and I didn't really see much of it in the opening few races. I never thought, oh my god, he is definitely the championship rider for this year, he's going to run away with it. But as the championship's gone on, he's gotten such good momentum that he really has shown that he has some sort of ability that is slightly above the field at the moment, and he definitely is. Whether he's better than Acosta or not going into Moto2, I don't know, but he definitely is a special rider going forward. So he'll be wanting to go for Moto2, and I reckon before long he'll probably end up in the factory GP bikes at some point. But for now, just hats off to him. He's been brilliant this year. Other probably letdowns, I'd say, I wouldn't name any riders, but definitely the Honda in general, just the bike. I think Honda really dropped the ball. The fact that so many times we've seen the Motogp P9 be top Honda and then be Scott Watley, a rookie, in like P14 be the second Honda. It's just, they've gone really, really backwards, and unfortunately it's really cost them this year, because we came into the year thinking it's Foggia's year. It's kind of, everything's kind of coming to this, it's coming together from now, but big mistakes from him as well. I just don't think he's had the package all year. We kind of look at his Fabio's condition, where he got the absolute utmost out of the bike all year, you could say, whereas maybe Foggia didn't, with a couple of crashes unnecessary. But I still don't think he would have beaten him, even if he kind of took a few mistakes off. I just don't think all year he had that machine underneath him where the KTM and the Gas boys did. So poor Honda's affected a lot of their championship challengers, and Guevara a real star for the future along with Pedro Acosta.
Yeah, it's going to be really good to see those guys going head to head in Moto2 next season. But we'll move on to Moto2 now, obviously, since we're already talking about it. And another couple of riders that really could go head to head, obviously still Acosta, but also Lopez. So his start to the race was pretty scrappy. Obviously on pole position, him and Acosta had looked the fastest guys all weekend, so it was really set up for a bit of a battle between them. And to be fair, probably the two favourites going into next year as well, those two riders. So it would have been interesting to see how it got on. But Lopez was riding rather strange. He lost the lead initially. Then he did a very aggressive pass on Acosta. I mean, almost ran him completely off the track. He just completely sat up underneath him. And they ran right to the edge of the track, a bit of contact. So it was a ridiculous move, really. Costa got back in front, and then I think through turn 5, Lopez again absolutely sent it at the inside in an aggressive fashion. Was looking a bit scrappy, and then ultimately fell off the bike. So what did you think, really, to Alonso's start? Because a bit unlike him, really, because usually he's quite cool and collected in these races.
I look back at Motegi when he did the exact same thing to Augusto Fernandez, but had none of the scrappiness. He was getting it stopped. He was doing brilliant moves, and he actually kind of single-handedly won the race for Iogura, giving him that break in that weekend. But for whatever, I reckon the turn 2 incident where he runs Acosta really wide, I reckon he's missed the downshift there. He's gone so far wide that I can't see that he's gone for the move and got it that badly wrong, in my opinion, because it's a straight line braking zone, it's flat, it does nothing awkward about it, there's no camber, there's no bumps. He didn't have a moment on entry that had to run wide. I reckon there's a misgear there will be probably he'll probably claim it anyway after running such an aggressive rider like Acosta so wide. But then again, he comes back at turn 5, does not room for the move he makes. He opens the door with a pry bar, and he was just so on edge, and it was actually quite entertaining to watch because it was helping out the championship in a way. It was kind of splitting up the two championship men for a bit, so we had a bit of a excitement whether Iagor could get to the front. But then he just ran so wide, and I think he got out onto the dirty part of the track because he looked like he was just out of the danger point, as if he was about to release the brake to kind of turn the bike back to come back in line, and just fell over, and it kind of looked like it caught everyone, including Lopez, by surprise. So small chink in his armour. We've bigged him up over the last few rounds. Everyone really has, because he has been absolutely stunning, but maybe just didn't have it this weekend. Was pushing more than he wanted to keep with the front guys. Bit of an odd one, because again, no, we've not seen anything like this of all so far. We've seen beautiful corner speed, lovely racing line, curb to curb, and just clean riding. And to see him this out of shape and this kind of flustered was very interesting. So maybe he isn't so dominant as we thought. Maybe he was on a good run of form, but we'll see going into next year whether he can reproduce that form and kind of push this behind him. Kind of not the way you really want to end the season, because he's had such a good run of form since he came in. Then there's a small dip here now, and a few question marks will be raised. You're only as good as your last race is a famous saying, so he'll go into a long winter now having thoughts of how he made the mistakes, how he crashed and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back next year, and especially through pre-season, because I'd imagine on the Bosco Tour he'll be very fast through pre-season along with his teammate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an unfortunate way to end the season, but I'm sure he won't let him. I'm sure it won't let it bother him too much. He's had a great season. He was almost Rookie of the Year, to be honest. If he'd beat Acosta in this race, he would have been Rookie of the Year. So I think maybe that could have been why
Good shout.
he would go for it so much. Because for him, that'd be amazing to say that you missed 6 races and still became Rookie of the Year. I know Acosta also missed a fair few through his leg injury, but even still, you can only go against who you're against, and that would have been absolutely fantastic to have come in that late and done that. So maybe that is a reason why, but yeah, I'm sure he won't let it bother him too much. But somebody else who's obviously going to be a bit disappointed, well, very disappointed coming out of Valencia, is Iagora. I mean, really, he came into the weekend saying he doesn't like Valencia and that he's going to struggle. Probably not the best thing to come in and say, but to be fair to Agora, he's always just pretty honest, says what he thinks, so fair enough. I respect him for coming out and saying, yeah, I don't really like this track. But he tried his best on the weekend, got a great start to the race, actually got in front of Augusto Fernandez, was fighting for the victory, was fighting quite aggressively with Acosta. Obviously, Lopez was kind of helping him with that one by sort of bashing Acosta back every time. And he was trying to close in on Tony Arbolino, but just, actually quite a strange crash. It's almost just like a kink on the straight rather than the actual corner that he crashed at. It's like when you're just about to hit the brakes. I think maybe he had a bit too much lean angle on. His teammate also did something similar, so it has been speculated maybe their setup is a little bit more susceptible to that. I'm not 100% sure, whether that really has any bearing or not. But just a small little mistake. He was trying all he could, but unfortunately just a crash for Agora there.
Yeah, I reckon he really lost the championship last time out in Sepang. There's such a big swing. I reckon, looking back now, the fact that he went for the win is, I think in his head he's like, I'm not very confident going into Valencia if I have to beat a Spaniard there. So I reckon that could have been a factor into the championship battle that we didn't really foresee at the time, just because we hadn't really been given the idea that he didn't like Valencia. But he was on edge. He nearly ran into the back of Arbolino in the final corner. He had a couple of big slides on corner entry. The front was moving. He did his best. He went out, gave it 100%, kind of did what he had to do. He kind of had to throw himself at it and hopefully didn't crash. Unfortunately, he did in a very unfortunate way and quite a quick crash. But I just look back to Sepang and that mistake again. He just handed a massive haul of points to Augusto there, and you're going to Spain, you're going to a track that isn't great for overtaking. It can be cold, you can have a bit of weather going on. He lost it in Sepang for me, and unfortunately he's fighting one hand behind his back this weekend trying to beat a Spaniard in Spain. It's never going to be easy. He kind of needed the likes of Lopez and all them to battle behind him, create some gaps and leave him get at Arbolino. But when Acosta started to close him in, he put him under pressure. Unfortunately, made only his second mistake in races this year after the crash in Sepang. And that was it, unfortunately. yeah, I don't know much to say about him. It's just unfortunate. He's kind of collapsed over the last 2 or 3 races. He looked so good in the midpoint of the season when Vietti started to misfire and Augusto Fernandez seemed to come to form. Igor looked like he was the one that would make the least amount of mistakes, and in the end it is his own mistakes that have cost him the championship, which is a shame. But he'll come back next year. I reckon he'll definitely learn from this, and next year he'll be as quick, if not quicker, and hopefully just round off some of the rough edges and we can go again and probably have a good chance again next year.
Yeah, of course. I suppose for him, it's not quite as bad as it would have been for Augusto if he didn't win, because Agora does still have another chance for next year. But Augusto Fernandez, I think you're right in saying that, pretty much won the championship in Sepang with Agora's big mistake, but kept a level ahead. It wasn't quite as done a deal as it was in MotoGP, so he definitely had to make sure he was up there. He couldn't circle around in 15th like Bagnaia potentially could have done. So Augusto went for it, to be fair, ended up second place, was pretty close to his teammate. As soon as Agora disappeared, you could kind of see that shift in his mentality, and he decided, you know what, may as well throw everything at it, try and win the race. He just came up short of that, but Anayo won too. Augusto Fernandez getting his World Championship before riding a MotoGP bike for the first time on Tuesday. Pretty much the perfect weekend, best weekend of his life, you'd say.
Yeah, he's been a slow burner in the class. He's had a couple of big teams, couple of moments where he thought, that's it, he has it now. He has the understanding how to go quick, and then he's gone and got lost again. And even this year, to start the season, crashed out of Indonesia. Afterwards,
such a clumsy, weird crash, wasn't it? Turn one, it was so unnecessary.
It was just the start of season. If we look back at the start of the season and go, yeah, that guy's going to win it, you'd be like, really? How many times is Vietti going to crash? And turns out 77 times is enough to lose your championship. But once he kind of got up to speed, it's kind of like his races, really. He's not great with the full tank and the fresh tyres, but once he just knocks off a couple of litres, the tyres come to him, he is very steady in the race, and it's very like that in his championship as well, where around the Sachsenring, have him win there and just kind of building momentum. He's another rider that hasn't made many mistakes. He's had weekends where he's finished 6th, but that was his ceiling, and to be fair, you have to have them races. Well, you can't go and finish second but crash out of every second race if you're trying to get there. You need to just put points on the board for a championship, and we look back to Moto3, Guevara did that when he wasn't quickest. He was getting thirds, he was getting fourths, seconds, fifths, and that's what Augusto's done. He's just put points on the board week after week. A small and very unlikely mistake in Phillip Island that probably should have lost him the championship. Igor massively let him off the hook with that one, and he's just been probably, I don't know if he's been the best rider all year, but he's obviously done enough. He has won the championship. He has done enough, but there's just so many like chapters to this season where it was Vietti, then it was maybe Canet, then it was Firmin, and Aguirre had stunning pace. If he could do that for the whole year, he could crawl back the points. Then Augusto had a few races, then it was Igor again, and it was the championship that no one's going to win, and it's come down to the last race. Augusto's done enough, and to be fair to him, it's well deserved. He's moving up to MotoGP now. Not too sure on the exact, shall we say, how that's going to go from, just because how they've treated Remy Gardner this year. I'd rate Remy Gardner more than Augusto, and they've chucked him out after 6 months. So I hope they treat him slightly, give more. I hope they give him at least 2 years. They have
the reputation's not good, is it?
Yeah, exactly. They had Equal Icona the year before. Now the two of them are in Superbike. So could we see Augusto on a ZX10 in 2024, 25? So I hope not, because we're seeing a lot of talent being shipped out just because KTM is just a spiral door at the moment where they keep kicking riders out after 7 or 8 rounds and they're not winning races. So unfortunately, I don't know what his future holds, but he's a world champion now and no one will ever take that off him. So I tip my hat to him, fair play to him. He did enough this year.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about him having a strange season. I mean, to start with, it didn't go very well. He was kind of having those weekends where he'd basically top all the free practices, then qualify pretty much nowhere, and then finish nowhere. It was bizarre. And then he'd have the weird races like Indonesia where he crashed, and it just all seemed to click from him from about Le Mans, where, to be honest, he didn't even look the fastest then. It was actually Costa that was really the quickest. The IO bikes had turned up that weekend. In fact, they both struggled up until that point, but they seemed to just find a setting that weekend, just improve so much. Then Acosta crashed from the lead, And ever since then, Fernandez has looked pretty formidable, obviously aside from the Phillip Island issue. But he's pretty much been there or thereabouts to get the positions. In Sepang, for example, he didn't crash fighting with Jake Dixon, even though it was pretty aggressive. So just overall, a weird start to the season, bit of a weird career, really. The way he even came through to Moto3, bit of an unorthodox route through some super sport categories and things like that, super stock racing. He just, it's always great when you see someone come through the different route. And even back to sort of 2019, he almost won the championship that year on the Pons bike, and then he signed for Mark VDS at like the last minute, and you thought, surely he's going to win, and then it's Sam Lowe that turns up flying for the championship in that team. So yeah, it's all around a little bit weird, but a great season for Augusto, I've got to say, and great to see that he is going up to MotoGP with a world championship under his belt. But overall, at the end of the season, there's so much you could say about Moto2. Like you say, there was so many different chapters of the championship, so many different people. My end-of-season thoughts are, Arbolino snuck up on me a little bit. He got fourth. He almost got third place in the championship at the last round there. It was pretty incredible, to be completely honest with him. That was very, very impressive. He'd won that race, he would have ended up third in the championship. And to be honest, I've not really thought he was anywhere all season. So that's definitely something that snuck up on me. But really it was just strange. I think that's my overall thought. The season was really bizarre. No one wanted to win it, but, it was just... It was interesting to watch throughout, which is great because Moto2 sometimes can get a bit stale.
Yeah, for me, my best moment was that Jake Dixon stopped crashing, and that would give him so much of a platform to go into next year as a title contender. I won't say favourite, title contender, because there's too many of them to call them all favourites. My favourites would be Acosta and Lopez. I wouldn't even put Iagora in there. They would be my two. No, I'd have the contenders would be Aldeguer, Canet, Dixon, maybe a few others if you're looking outside the box. But for me this year, Dixon stopped crashing. He started the year quite well, had good pace, and just the first 5 rounds he had a lot of bad luck, made mistakes under pressure, crashed out of races like Indonesia where he really could have won. Portimao, he was so far back at the start, didn't crash in the rain part, then got to a 1v1 versus Joe Roberts and he crashed. So it was an awkward season for him. Then he started to put results on the board and lots of podiums. Now he hasn't got the duck off his back of a race win. I don't think that would be a huge thing for him. I think if he can continue the momentum of just getting consistent points, if we have another season like this next year, which I doubt, he could be there, no question, just because of the consistency. He seems very good this year after he kind of sorted out his early form. A small issue would be his qualifying. There's too many weekends like this weekend where he starts 15th. He was down in 23rd at the start of today's race. I believe he finished P8 after all was said and done. So he'll be a tip for next year. My best moment for this year, probably Iagora winning his home race. A Japanese rider in a Japanese team winning in Japan. It was pretty special. So I'll give it to that one for now, just because I am a big Iagora fan and he didn't win the championship, so I have to big him up somehow.
Yeah, that was quite special, to be fair. It was great to see. Actually, it's overall Motegi, to be fair, for the Japanese riders was a great weekend because I think, was Sasaki on pole as well?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, so it was a great weekend for the Japanese fans at the Japanese Grand Prix. So we'll move on to the MotoGP class now, and the order is going to be a little bit jumbled because we wanted to sort of save the actual championship discussion till the end. So to start with, I just going to give a shout out to Brad Binder because KTM brought some new frame apparently this weekend. Well, seems to have worked. Brad Binder started the season with a second place, ends on with a second place, but there's not really been anywhere in the middle. Very strange season for Binder, but a great race from him nonetheless.
I'm a huge Brad Binder fan, and it kills me to see every week that he doesn't get out of Q1. And he starts 14th, and each race he finishes P7 or P8, and he makes up all the positions in, let's be honest, a sport at the moment that's not easy to make overtakes. So I always think, geez, if he could qualify 6th or 7th, or he could make up some serious ground. And he came from 7th today all the way to 2nd. New frame, new engine as well, apparently coming in the test on Tuesday. So I rate him enough that I reckon he can win a world title if he can get a bike that's good enough. Now, you'll have to beat Fabio, Pecco, Mark, Bastianini, so there's a bit of a list of riders that he'll have to compete with, but I believe he is good enough. There's no doubt in my mind that Brad Binder is good enough. The fact he doesn't really crash that often, especially in races, and the way he comes forward and his race style is just his overall, his racecraft is good. I just like Brad Binder quite a lot, and I really hope that for his sake more than anything that KTM get the RC16 in line for next year and give him a bike that can be there a lot more often. But we'll see, because there's a lot of teams that need to improve, and realistically someone's going to drop the ball. Not every team is going to be a championship running team next year, unfortunately. So let's hope KTM do get it for Brad's sake, but I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year again we're talking about how Brad's had 3 great races all year and then he's been fighting on back from the 7th row on the grid again every weekend. But great result today. He just showed so well, and I reckon if he was a bit more aggressive with Pecco and Fabio, he might have won it. I reckon he gave Pecco a bit too much caution. Easier said than done. But he lost many laps and he only finished 0.4 behind Rins, but it was just a step too far today, but still a brilliant performance.
Yeah, it was a great performance on a bike that just is so strange. It just sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And another performance on a bike that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Alex Rins. Well, to be fair, 2 wins in the last 3 races. Suzuki have kind of been in the doldrums ever since they announced they were leaving. Why they're leaving makes absolutely no sense when you've won the last race of the season, especially when you won the championship about 2 years ago as well. So the bike is clearly good. But Rins, just amazing start off the line. I mean, he jumped like 3 Ducatis on the run to turn 1. I mean, that's not easily done. He braked really late, took the lead. That was it. That was the race-winning overtake, was turn 1. No one got past him again, and he just controlled the race from the front. Valencia, a track where both he and the Suzuki have gone very well in the past, and just a faultless performance for Alex Rins, and it's such a good send-off for Suzuki, but it is such a shame they're leaving. It's just, that's terrible.
It really begs the question on why are they leaving, because the whole team
sounds like it's the board decision. I don't think anybody else. I think even Mr. Suzuki doesn't want to leave.
By the sounds of it, they've got some new board members in, and they've kind of come in and they want to shake it up, and they're like all EVs and electric vehicle kind of crap, and then racing, because it's not just GP. They've pulled out of literally every form of competitive racing, so it's a very weird decision.
And they've stopped making their superbike as well.
Yeah, and the Gixxer 1000 now has been retired, unfortunately. So it's just Suzuki now is a family car manufacturer that makes electric vehicles. There are no more the likes of the Sheen days, the Schwanz days, the Kenny Roberts. Will be forever more now just history, and whether they'll come back, because they did leave again in the 800s and came back, and they have history for it. Will they do it again? I don't know. I hope they'll come back, but at this point now, it's hard for me ever to see them come back, to be honest. The fact that they've new people upstairs that clearly don't want racing as part of the brand, they want to focus on more the 4-wheel side of it and the electric propulsion systems. For me, it's a damn shame, considering 2020 world champions, race winners this year. They've just been brilliant since their return in 2015? 16?
Yeah.
15?
2015.
Yeah. And it's just a damn shame, really. It's just it's terrible for the sport, because I remember when the news had announced, it caught everyone by surprise. The whole team didn't know until literally when we found out, so it was just so badly handled.
That was terrible. That was absolutely terrible. They told them that.
It just was badly handled. It was very un-Japanese. There was no kind of honour about it, and I don't know. I'm still not happy about the decision now. I, of course, have no input in it, unfortunately. And the fact that they're so good at the moment, and they had 2 brilliant riders. Oh, I was so disappointed. Like, to put into context, Alex Rins and Joan Mir were in contract talks to re-sign for the next couple of years with a team that was in the back room pulling out. That's how badly mismanaged they were, and it's just terrible, because then you left 2 riders that have nowhere to go. Thankfully, they're both on the grid next year, and they both are on Hondas. Whether that'll go, which way that'll go, I don't know, because of our Japanese manufacturer having a terrible time. But it's just no reason why they should have pulled out now. fair enough if they were struggling and there was money issues. But I know they're a smaller factory, but like they're doing enough. And like at the start of the season, they went and got Livio Supo, a ex-Ducati man, ex-Honda man, multiple championships under his belt. It showed a sign of consent. And for round 5 or 6, they announced they're pulling out. Terrible decision. But for Rins' race, we'll go back to Rins because I've blubbered on too much about Suzuki pulling out. Rins has this in his locker when he can. He is a very good rider on his day, and he showed today. I think it was a bit like Lorenzo's last ride for Yamaha that no one was beating him today. He had it on the cover. Brilliant start. It's really hard to overtake anyone at this track. I think Suzuki just has enough out of the corners and on the straight that the Ducati can't do anything too stupid to them. So, masterful performance. Fair play to him. I wish him well in Honda, but I don't think we'll see him winning any races again anytime soon.
Yeah, it is a shame because that Honda's just not up to it. Maybe if it turns the corner, he can try and improve, but I just feel like his riding style's not going to suit the Honda particularly well. I would love to see him. I don't know, has he signed a 1 or a 2 year deal? I actually don't know.
I believe
but
it's a 1. I think it's a 1+1.
Yeah, I would personally love to see him. Well, I wouldn't love to see him on the Honda, but I'd like to see him just do this year on this next year on the Honda, and then take Morbidelli's right at the Yamaha. I'd love to see that because I think he could be really good on the Yamaha. And this Morbidelli, it's not really getting any better. So I reckon Rins would be a great teammate to Quartararo as well. But yeah, just terrible decision. I think you're right. I don't see Suzuki coming back because at least previously they just pulled out of MotoGP. They were still competing in other series, but they pulled out of everything. So it's going to be a long time, if ever, if we see them again. But moving back to the start of the race then now, obviously covering that, onto the title rivals. A very, very aggressive start between the two main protagonists. Jack Miller getting a bit involved with them as well. Fabio and Pecco, well, Fabio sort of got pushed wide by Miller. Then Pecco went underneath and there was contact. Pecco lost a wing. Then Fabio was diving up his inside at every corner and running wide, just trying to get in front of him because Quartararo had to win the race. So he had to get in front of Pecco. And it's so difficult to pass the Ducati. You could see him just lunging it into every single corner. It was some great battle. It's so aggressive. It was the first time I've ever really seen them go to wheel, to be honest, because they're never really bar to bar. They're always either miles in front or miles behind. It's a little bit strange because they've been the two protagonists for 2 years, but it was just some great racing, very aggressive, a little bit maybe over the line in a couple of places, but nothing that you would complain too much about.
Yeah, it was really spicy at the start of the race. Fabio was risking so much, and I think he was just trying to rough up Pecco, hoping that he might make a mistake and kind of aid him. But it actually kind of took away from Fabio's chance of winning the race because it ended up making a bit of a gap between him and Marquez. And that group then had such a gap that by the time Fabio caught to him, he was kind of his race run. So for me, I think the best opportunity was maybe not to be so aggressive with Pecco and just see if he could have got ahead of him and just throw a couple of laps out of the way. Maybe just made the gap just to kind of stick with Marquez and stuff. But of course, it's easier said than done when he was being passed by the Ducatis out of every half straight or anything like that. He was getting past, so he kind of was playing, not, I wouldn't say dirty, but very aggressive to rough them up, to not give them the opportunity to make a comfortable lap or two that would give him just enough that he wouldn't be able to re-overtake them. He was throwing some serious moves. He passed Pecco into turn 4, which is it's a well-known track for being very difficult into that corner because the tyre temps very easily could make a mistake, and there are a lot of riders have crashed down, taking those down. His overtake on him in turn 8 where he ran really wide, then held on the outside similar to Dennis Onchu in Moto 3, and then threw it back up the inside into 11. The contact with the wing, I think that was the warning for Pecco, where he was like, after that he just seemed like a totally different rider. He just really shut off 10% and was like, yeah, I'm riding at 90%. I'll go round until the bike runs out of fuel and I'll finish this race, and wherever I finish, but I will get my championship. And that's what he did. But in Fabio's run, he just lost the gap to the leaders, and that was just the moment where you go, no, it's a bridge too far. And unfortunately, that's probably what cost him a big chance at winning the race.
Yeah, the race was pretty much almost run after the first 5 laps in terms of the championship because they did lose so much time. I think that was also another reason why Fabio was just trying to be so aggressive, because I think he knew Pecco would probably just hold him up on purpose if, he was stuck behind him, because if Fabio doesn't win, then Pecco's champion. So, of course, Pecco was going to not be too aggressive, but if Fabio can't get past him, back the pace off a little bit, make sure the gap grows. So I think that was one of the reasons. And I was actually surprised about how aggressive he was sort of initially, Bagnaia, because if I was Bagnaia, I would just let Fabio go, because I would just focused on, not crashing particularly. I mean, he's got most of the riders beat anyway, so I would say 50th place would have been, 40th place would have been more than achievable for him. But it was nice to see him actually go for it, because he could have just circled round slowly. But then, of course, like you say, after the contact, he did start to play it cool. He did start to slow it down, and he just took his time, really. Brad Binder was stuck behind him for quite a while, and then Binder finally managed to overtake him. Then Mir took a while to pass him. Then who was next after that? There was a couple of Ducatis, wasn't there? One of them, Marini went past him, which I was quite surprised about. I don't know what you thought about that. I was not expecting Marini to overtake him.
He was going, Pecco was going so slow that Marini was like, I'm going to get backed up into the pack here. I'm going to have to overtake him. And by the look of it, I don't remember seeing the overtake from Bastianini, but it looked like Pecco was like, yeah, just take it. I don't want anything to do with you, because they cut to a shot and going in. They cut to a shot in turn 2. And Pecco, it looks like Pecco saw front wheel, just released his own brake. Was like, yeah, I'm going wide. I'm not even going to tip in here, because it looks like, the thing was, when you first see it, it looks like Pecco's been lifted up off the corner. He's been like passed aggressively, but I reckon he was just like, yeah, you can have this. I'll give you as much space as you want. Probably a lack of trust in Bastianini after Mazzano and Phillip Island or Sepang and Aragon and stuff like that. So I'd say he just wanted to get rid of that. He wanted as much clear track as possible, and he did end up getting that, and that was really what he needed for his race today.
Yeah, I think he just obviously knew what he needed to do, and after the first few laps, he did just slow down and manage it. But I was also obviously I was surprised that Marini went through, but I'm also surprised he went through when he did. Didn't he pass into turn 4?
Yeah, I was talking
about. That's easy to lose the front end.
Turn 4 is one of those corners where you've turned left, and you go right for the first time in 7 corners, I believe. And by the time you get to that corner, your front tire's gone cold. It is so easy to do it. You would not want to be passing your good friend, your title challenger, your manufacturer teammate into that corner in the last race season. But he did it, and he did it quite aggressively and quite fair, to be fair to him. I think, again, now Pecco probably felt it coming. I was like, as soon as I see a wheel, I'm going to just lift myself up and make sure I don't get connected with. And to be fair to me, he did make it clean, but it was just a bit sketchy and got into that corner. That's not really the corner I'd go for it if I was him, but fair play to him, he did get it done.
Yeah, it was certainly more risk than you'd want to take. But speaking of taking risks, obviously Fabio, like we mentioned before, he was super aggressive in the early stages, but not just with Pecco, obviously with Jack as well in turn 1. He tried to, turn 1, I think it was on lap 2 or something like that, tried to pass, ran a bit wide, then Miller ran him sort of to the a bit wide, which has allowed Pecco to get the inside of the contact to happen. But even after that, once he finally dispatched of Pecco, he put 100% in. He pretty much bridged that gap to the guys in front. I mean, Binder then cut and passed him, to be fair, but you could tell Fabio was just putting in 100%. The gap was already too big. He probably had to use a bit of tyre to get there. The Yamaha package, well, we saw how good that was. That was, 2 were in the gravel, and 1 was behind Pecco, who was going slow to not crash. So it gives you a bit of an idea about how much the bike was struggling there. But Fabio, just like he has all season, he put 100% into it. It's a shame for him, really, because had a couple of things gone differently, he could very well have been the champion. If he had got the right tyre pressures in at Thailand, he'd have a few more points. If he hadn't made that botched pass on Aleix at Assen, he'd have 16 more points at least there, and he wouldn't have then had the long lap at Silverstone, so he could have had more points there. So for Fabio, his season did come unravelled a little bit, but as always, he put 100% into it. A bit similar to Agora, really, in Moto2. It was great to see someone really just push 100%, but it was also great to see him make it to the end of the race and the sportsmanship after as well, to go to Pecco and Part Ferme. They seemed to get on pretty well. He obviously also went up to him right after the race on the track as well, but then to go and congratulate him in Part Ferme, like without the helmets on, was a nice touch, I thought, as well.
Yeah, I watched Fabio's gaps a lot today, and you just get a sense of how bad that Yamaha is, because I know how good he is, and I know what he's doing on that bike, and he just looks on edge everywhere, and there's just the lap time isn't there, and he can't make it up everywhere else. And the fact that Morbidelli is so far down, Cal is a test rider out of retirement. You have a rookie from Moto3 on the other bike in the RNF team, so Yamaha is just in a mess. Apparently, the new engines coming is better. Whether it's enough, at the moment the gap is so good that better isn't going to be enough. He was getting passed by the line out of the final corner by the Ducatis. He was on edge today to do anything. I reckon he used a lot of tyre to get to near the front group, a bit like you could say Jonathan Rea in Superbikes, where he knows he's a massive pace advantage in the corners, but on the straight he loses so much, so he has to use his edge grip, and he just uses all his edge grip around that tight little Valencia track, and then Brad Binder just coasts up to the back of him, makes a lovely little pass in him, and Fabio doesn't really have anything for it. Like, Fabio just doesn't have anything at the moment at Yamaha, and going forward they'll need to increase a bit of top end, find some tyre wear from somewhere and a bit of rear grip, and they'll have to maybe sort out their wet performance a little, because they are never been so bad in the wet in my time watching GPA. I remember back as far as 2004 they were never this bad in the wet, and now they are the bogey team in the rain. As soon as there's a bit of rain, you know Yamaha are going to go backwards. So just so many weak links in that team at the moment that even with the likes of such a brilliant rider as Fabio Quartararo, you just would think to yourself, if there's a normal season next year where Marquez is fit, Honda's decent, the Ducatis are there, he's not going to win it again. And that's nothing to do with him. That's simply down to the team behind him just not being the 5 stars he needs at the moment. And it's a shame, because I don't think he'll wait around forever for that team. I reckon he won't have the loyalty of like a Marquez will, where he'll kind of hang in when times get tough. I reckon if an offer comes in, I could see him jumping and leaving. At the moment, it's just, he's so good, and I think he knows he's good, and I think Yamaha knows as well. So it's the fact they've gotten Tom O'Kane from Suzuki, and that they have a new engine coming with a bit more horsepower. They finally seem to maybe get their act together with that engine. So I reckon they know that if they lose Fabio, they're in big trouble, and I think Fabio knows that too, and he will use his cars to get what he wants.
Yeah, I think the package certainly letting him down, and like you say, I can't see him sticking around forever if it doesn't improve. Obviously, we'll know on Tuesday. Well, we won't know on Tuesday. We won't know till we won't know until next November, will we? Really, if the package is any better, but it will be interesting to see if it is any better. Apparently, it is. They did seem to rave about it in the Misano test, but this is one of those things you never know till you actually get in race trim. You never know till you've had a full season. But just a great season from him. You can't really fault him. I know I pointed out a couple of errors, but when you're pushing over the limit every race, you're going to make a couple of mistakes. So who can blame him particularly? So once again, obviously on to the end of season thoughts. It's just such a strange season in MotoGP. Pecco Bagnaia make it back, a 91-point deficit. I remember not even just on one episode, on multiple episodes saying, no way is he going to win it. He's miles behind. No way is he going to get this many points. And that wasn't an uncommon opinion. I know I was probably particularly, negative about it, but that wasn't a particularly uncommon opinion. A lot of people thought that. Even Ducati themselves, I think, thought that. That was at the championship over. They were probably getting ready to rebuild for next year. But just the pace of Bagnaia. I mean, how many races did he win this year? Did he win
7 overall?
7? So yeah, 7 races this year in a 20-round championship. It's almost half of the races. He also crashed out of 5 races. So he DNF'd in a quarter of the races this season, still won the championship, which is just incredible. So that stat in itself is my overriding thought from the season. But my best moment has got to be, I think for me, it's the pass that Fabio pulled on Miller at Austria in the chicane. The way he sort of came around the outside, stuffed it up the inside. That was such a good move, I thought. Just fantastic move. That's my standout moment of the season. But overall, just what a bizarre season it was.
For me, it's not Fabio, it's not Pecco, it's the Aprilia boys. Aleix winning in Argentina, that performance in Assen after he got punted wide, the double overtake into the final corner, a few other moments out through the year. Of course, unfortunately, we had Catalunya where he made the mathematical error, but it was so good to see another manufacturer up there, see a rider that we're not used to being running at the front. And unfortunately, it didn't end as well as we hoped. It kind of went completely against him. I think he lost third in the championship as well today, retiring early. His teammate was last for a lot of today's race as well, also retiring. So they unfortunately dropped off a clip massively towards the end of the season. But hopefully, with an extra 2 bikes on the grid next year, having some fast riders in the team as well, they might be able to just build upon this year. Now, it will be tricky because you'll have the likes of Yamaha gunning to come back. You'll have Honda knowing Marquez is there. You'll have KTM knowing that they have a gem in Brinder that they need to deliver a bike. They'll have Ducati knowing that, well, we've won our first one in 15 years. Let's not make it another 15 years before we win another one. So in MotoGP, it's never going to be easy to get back to the top. So it's going to take some time for them. If they can do it, I'll be delighted. But the overtake of the season has to be, for me, the Assen into the chicane from Aleix. The double overtake from a million miles back was sublime.
Actually, completely forgot about that. That was a fantastic move. I think it is worth noting about the Aprilia, because I actually haven't got any notes about them here, but their end of the season has not been great. Obviously, they started off the season so well. From about halfway through, they've started to struggle. I feel like the last good race I'd say they had was for like Misano, to be completely honest. Like when obviously Vinales was running second for a lot of that race. They just, I don't know, it was so bizarre the way they sort of dropped off a cliff. I'm hoping that they do come back next year. The pace still somewhat seems there. It wasn't like over one lap they lost it all. They did seem to some extent still have it. So I'm hoping that they carry that forward and go into testing, they can sort of reset and come back. And it'd be nice to see both of them at the front. And then, like you say, obviously there'll be 2 more with the RNF bikes. So it'd be nice to see them at the front as well. Because it's great to see all the manufacturers be competitive. It'd be nice to see the Honda up there a little bit more as well. Because really, if Honda actually managed to get a win at some point this year, every manufacturer would have won a race this year, which is incredible. But unfortunately, they didn't. I know that's like, oh, well, they didn't. But most years, Honda do win. And I think if Marquez had been here the whole season and fit, he most certainly would have won one of the races. So I think it would be fair to say that MotoGP is as competitive as it's ever been, but it'd be nice to have it a little bit closer with the bikes. Maybe, curb that Ducati OP-ness a little bit, because they do seem to have a little bit of a step over the rest of them. So hopefully into next year, the Aprilia will continue to improve and be up there. And obviously it did have a championship campaign this year, but a proper one next year where they know going into the season that they actually are contenders, because obviously they didn't expect it this year.
Yeah, it just missed a small bit of that kind of big team mentality where they could stretch it out for the season. Nobody came into the year thinking that we all thought maybe if they were to get another couple of podiums, they'd do brilliantly this year. If Maverick can get his head around it, if he can do that. The fact they won in Argentina, Aleix got 6 podiums, I think. I think that's correct.
I'm not sure.
Maverick getting on the podium. So
yeah,
overall,
both got a podium.
Exactly. Like both the factory Yamahas didn't get a podium, the factory Hondas didn't both get a podium. Factory Suzuki's, I don't think Mir's on the podium.
The factory Hondas did get a podium.
Oh, wrong one.
On the podium at Qatar.
Yeah. So
think about how long ago that seems.
20 rounds ago.
Nowhere since Qatar. What was that all about?
I actually would love to go back and listen to what we said about how they looked so well and they looked like the bike was working. And
I know, it looked so good in the Indonesia test and all that stuff. And then it's after Qatar, it was like, oh my God, Paul Espargaro's up there on it. It's going to be good. And we all thought Marquez was fine as well. It turns out he certainly was not. I'd love to go back and, see what we said earlier on the season. Also look at our predictions, because I'm sure they're going to be a little bit wrong.
I think mine were pretty accurate in GP. I think the other classes were way off the mark, but
mine were wrong everywhere.
Oh yeah, I reckon I will do a video going back over them and revealing how far off the mark were. But we'll come to that in another day. But for now, really, the season is so long that there was so many. Like we go back to we think about how strong Fabio was at the start. He wasn't really. He's only won 3 races this year. He started off with a P8 in Qatar, and we thought Yamaha are in trouble. Then he got a brilliant race under his belt in Indonesia in the wet, pulling something stunning out in a wet race like that was really fantastic. And then it just went back and forth. He was either amazing or the bike just wouldn't work, and that's what's cost him this year. Unfortunately, it's not really down to him. It's just a small little bits here and there that's cost him on the Yamaha, and unfortunately, it will go on to catch him in years to come unless they can really make a big step. And I think that's the big thing going into next year, along with Marquez getting fully fit. I think a fully fit Marquez could wrestle that bike into submission and winning a few races. I think at the moment he needs the winter just to build on himself and then come back again, I would say. We'll go again.
Yeah, I think he really is going to be one to watch. Now, I also had him down as a champion for this year, but maybe next year, I'll be right. But I think that pretty much brings us to a close for the season. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed listening to us on whatever platform you use, Spotify, YouTube, whichever. Hopefully you do like it. If you're on YouTube, do give the video a like, or Spotify, if you could rate 5 stars, it does help us out a lot. We will be back. I don't think it will be all the way till Qatar. I think we'll do some off-season podcasts, so it's not so long, but we'll have to discuss that, see what we're going to do. But I hope you have enjoyed that one. We'll see you in the next podcast.